Welcome to Renewed Hope After Loss. I'm Kelli Shoemaker. This podcast, we talk about real conversations. We have real conversations, real stories about loss, but we won't want to leave you there. We want to have hope. That's why it's called Renewed Hope After Loss. Today, I'm very happy to be joined by Ed Owens. He is the Vice President of the Grief Recovery Institute, and he's the producer of the Feel Free Again with Cole James podcast. If you haven't checked out this podcast, you really want to listen to it. Their podcast is really about inspirational stories and helpful information to help you feel free again, especially after loss. Thank you so much, Ed, for joining me today. And I do want to say on there, too, that Ed is a great mentor. He mentors me a lot. So thank you, Ed, for joining me.
You're very welcome. And thanks for the invite, Kelli. And to all of you that are tuning in and listening, thank you for tuning in. Thanks for giving us your attention. I always like to thank people for leaning in with curiosity, right? Sometimes we don't know what people are going to talk about. Sometimes we may not even agree with what they're going to talk about. And I always ask people, let's be curious. So I'm curious where this conversation is going, so I'm going to lean into it. And I encourage all of the listeners to lean in with curiosity as well, right?
Great.
And if you have questions, please at the end, get a hold of Kelli, ask questions. Again, that's part of this conversation.
Yeah. We're not right on everything we say. We talk about a lot of things on this podcast. My heart is, and I believe it's Ed's heart too, is just that we can be an inspiration, that we can help you know that we are there to help you with information, and you don't have to feel the pain or stay in that place anymore. Like the podcast, Feel Free Again, like mine, you can have renewed hope again. You don't have to stay there. Ed, what brought you to the Grief Recovery Institute? Can you share with us?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a great place to start. So I'm going to back it up a little bit before what actually brought me here. And I want to preface it by saying, like all of us, I moved through life and I experienced a lot of things throughout my life. Because what would bring me to the method would not start until I was in my 40s. Mm-hmm. But I had a whole lifetime prior to the journey that led me to where I'm at. And like all of us, we experience life, sweet and joyous and happy aspects of life, and the parts of life that are sour and painful and don't feel so good. That's normal. To not feel those things, there's a percentage of the population that can't feel anything, and that's not normal. To have no emotions. But for the rest of us, we all have this. And like all of us, I moved through life thinking I kind of had it figured out. Some things hurt really bad. Mm-hmm. And then I just how do I move through this? And how do I survive this? And how do I deal with this? And, I looked at what I was taught, and I looked at what other people in those moments said, hey, this helped me. Have you thought about this? And I had 2 careers in my life. Neither one of them emotions were embraced. So I started out my career after high school in the military. Started out active duty, and then I switched to the reserves. And I would eventually retire from almost a 21-year career with 4 combat tours. So, in my time. On the civilian side, I was a police officer for 23 years. So whether it was being in the military or being a police officer, you have a mission, you have a call, you have something that you respond to something, you are sent to go deal with something. Regardless, we're trained to compartmentalize to the mission comes first. Or I've been called or I've been sent to help this person who's having a terrible day. Because nobody calls 911 to say, hey, something? Best day of my life. I'm having a barbecue. You want to come over? That's just not the way that works in emergency services. People, for the most part, are having some of the worst days of their life, and we go to try to help them to restore peace, protect something or someone, save somebody. Those are. So it's go ahead.
You could be having the worst day of your life while you're doing that, right? Too.
Right. I will tell you, there's whether it's military or it's law enforcement. And anyone has a first responder or veteran in their lives, if you were to ask them, so let's say first responders, so fire, paramedic, EMT, police, 911 dispatchers, if you were to ask them, what were some of the worst calls or the worst things you had to deal with, they will immediately tell you what they were if they're willing to be honest, because you will carry those for the rest of your life.
Why wouldn't they be honest with that, though? Why wouldn't they
Because
tell you?
that's a great question. And a lot of that is a couple of things. One, we're we're the ones that get called.
Right.
We are the first responder. So we're the ones that have to be strong. That's our job. And so we are trained to compartmentalize. We are trained to disassociate those things. We have to take care of business. I have to deal with this call, help this person, take care of the mission, whatever that is, but we're the people that respond. So I can't, if I'm not emotionally strong and I can't put my feelings off to the side to focus and get this done, if I want to save that life, I've got to be able to focus on saving that life. If I want to be able to deal with whatever I've been sent or called to deal with, I need to be able to put my feelings up to the side. Why won't they talk about that? It's because you have an entire career of you are the person people look to as a source of peace, comfort, strength. You are the calm in the middle of the storm. You are the person who comes in when they need help. And so it's really hard to set aside that armor and then talk about what's behind, what's underneath the surface that you can't see, because we're not used to it.
Does that, I think people think that stuff disappears. What happens with all that stuff that you're dealing with every day in the job? I mean, some days are probably not as hard as some other days, but you need to put that, it's like our emotions are energy, and energy doesn't dissipate. Energy
Yeah,
just changes. And so what happens to all of that energy, all of
you
that?
carry it. You carry it. You carry it with you. You carry it with you throughout your career. You carry it with you, even though we all do the best we can, pull in the driveway, take a few minutes. Okay, I need to leave work at home. I need to step into my home. A lot of times you don't talk about like, how was your day? It was a rough day, but we're not going to talk too much about it. Maybe you do to a degree, but only to that level you're willing to. Because there's also the other part of it is we also don't want the people that we love and care about to look at us like, how did you do that? Like, why did you do that? Like, again, so there's one, being strong, and two, we don't want the people that we love and care about to look at us differently. And in particular, like with some veterans who go to a combat zone, for us to try to describe the things we saw, or more like even things we did, like there's internalized feelings of shame, remorse, regret, guilt, all these other things. And I don't want the people that love me to look at me with wide eyes and shock and they're
Because that adds that will add another level to you, because then
right,
it goes right back to you, right?
right, right. And so we carry these things. And again, we have to a degree, compartmentalize it. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to go do the job the next day. But what I experienced in either one of those two careers, like let's go back to first responders. Why do you get into those jobs? You get into those jobs because you have these huge hearts. You want to help people. You want to help your community. You want to help your fellow community members, your neighbors. You want to make a difference in the world. But look at somebody who's been doing it for 25 years. They are a little more jaded, right? You might call that street smarts, and they definitely have that. They've seen a lot. They know how to navigate stuff. And I'm not minimizing that. And anyone who's listening to this, don't hear that. You've learned critical skills. You're very good at what you do. But we have a very jaded outlook of the world. And that's because of all of those experiences we're carrying with us. We see the dark side of humanity, and it's kind of hard once you see something to unsee what you've seen, and you start to, almost like you expect it. And
You don't see the good in people because you're expecting to see that dark side because you see it so often. Is that what you're saying?
yep, yeah, and we become jaded. We become, it's us versus them mentality can start to seep in, and I just want to get to retirement and retire. Like we lose the drive and the passion of why we would look forward to going to work every day, and now it becomes just something I have to do and come home. And again, we've lost what started that spark for a lot of people. No, don't get me wrong. I know some folks, great careers, and they were like happy every single day to go to work.
Mhm.
But I will tell you, they were the exception. They were not the norm. Most people start to get this. So again, we carry it with us. We carry it with us throughout our career. We
Mhm.
carry it with us into our families, right? Most people who are the spouses or families of a first responder or a veteran will tell you they're different after they came back from that tour. Over the years, I saw them start to change. From still the person that I've always known,
Mhm.
but they changed.
Yeah.
They got an edge to them. They got a toughness to them. Maybe a little more distant, right? A little quieter, a little more reserved, a little more isolated in how they or what they choose to express. And if they are expressing things, they might notice tinges of like a tone, like there's some frustrations and there's some
Yeah.
frustrations, and I guess anger would be one word you could use. But you can feel like sometimes when they talk, you could feel that edge, and they didn't have that 20 years ago.
I had
Like,
a
where'd they
friend
get that?
I had a friend who was a police officer, and he said, and he was funny, and like he was joking around, but we got a serious conversation, and he goes, "Marriage is tough because I'm a different person now than when I first became a police officer in my marriage." Because he comes home and it's just different. It's just dark. Like you said, it's darker. It's just there's like I guess it's the darker side that you were talking about. He didn't see life the same way that he did when he first joined the police academy.
You can't. You can't. And again, going to a police officer more so than say a different first responder, but they all have very similar characteristics. I've got friends that are firefighters and
Mhm.
paramedics, and I got friends that are dispatchers. I mean, and they're all to differing degrees. There's truth in the same things we're talking about. For the cops on the road or a custody officer, you're always worried about this other person is going to hurt or kill you. So you learn to distrust everybody. And when you go in someplace, you're always evaluating the environment from a safety perspective. Well, one, you have to, right? That's part of the job, but it's just one example. Like when you're off duty or you retire, that carries forward. Well, where did you learn all that? You learned it from a career of doing things that were not necessarily safe. And the way you stay safe is that you look at everything as a threat. And when everything is a threat, boy, do you think we don't want to get emotionally honest? Do you think we don't want to let people in too close? You think I want to physically don't want to let you get too close to me? Don't even touch me. I mean, right? Like I will react again, training experience and all of those things.
It's a
So it's
lack
just
of
a couple of
trust.
examples.
It's probably
Yeah,
hard to trust people because
sure,
you're like, I just there's something there that's just not. You might feel that right away.
sure. And we can spend an hour just talking about safety and trust and, how do you go home at the end of your shift and what is the emotional baggage
Hmm.
that we all have to carry as a result of that. Because the moment that I distance myself from others for whatever reason, right? I'm worried about my safety. I'm worried about my emotional safety. I'm worried about how people are going to judge me or what they might say if I was honest. Like all these other things that create distance, right? This fear, whatever the fear is. And again, I'm not saying that somebody who's a first responder, I'm not saying that they're afraid
Right.
because they're the ones that run into the building that's on fire. They're the ones that run towards the sound of
Of
danger,
gunfire. Yeah.
gunfire, or whatever else. They're the ones who are putting themselves in harm's way to render first critically life-saving first aid, in a car accident situation, where they could get hurt or killed. Um, so again, like it's not a fear of that. It's more of a fear of like being judged or being criticized or fears around if I'm going to expose myself to something, right, that's super uncomfortable. And again, if I don't have the tools to navigate it, I don't navigate it very well. And then I'm going to rely upon things like to feel better. There's a reason why a lot of first responders don't have very many successful careers or successful marriages, or they move in and out of a lot of marriages.
Or even just
That's
relationships with
sure.
before you get married, or even maybe friendships, except for maybe
Yep.
people that are
Are
in your
also first
career.
responders.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a reason why a lot of first responders marry other first responders, or they marry doctors or nurses from the ER, or they marry, you know, dispatchers, or a firefighter. Like, again, that there's comfort and familiarity and not being judged.
Mm-hmm.
because these other people also have careers, where again, we never fully understand what somebody goes through on a call because we weren't there, but we try to imagine how we would have felt if we were there, and we definitely can remember the times we had to go do something and it didn't feel good.
Yeah.
And so that familiarity that's why those you see people gravitate towards one another for that. But all this thing started because for me, I mean, those are my two careers. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was not very emotionally available, right?
Right.
Either one of my first two marriages, I was not. Um, I will tell you my lack of being emotionally available in large part because, like I met my first wife after my first combat tour, and that's pretty in a kind of a spiraling place. She actually pulled me out of
Mm.
that. So she pulled me out of drinking all the time and just, I was not in a good place after the first Gulf War. So she pulled me out of that. But we were together when 9/11 happened, and I was mobilized from the reserves.
So.
And I spent almost 18 months apart, two back-to-back combat tours. And it changed me. So even before that, I wasn't the most emotionally available partner and husband.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I was even less emotionally available. I was more angry. I was trying to keep everything compartmentalized. And of course, these were all factors that led to the end of that first marriage. Again, that's my part. Second marriage as well, going to Iraq, beginning of my second marriage. Came home from that, but my first son was born. So again, like I know I'm glossing over a whole lot of things. My point being, my romantic relationships in my life, I was not emotionally available.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I kept a lot of that separate, which impacted my family relationships.
You
Right?
talk
Not
about
just
keeping that stuff separate, but when you're dealing with that stuff, we push it down to keep it separate, right? Is that when you push it down? It does sometimes come up, and I think that's
oh,
maybe times where that
absolutely,
it
absolutely,
I
absolutely.
can't talk about your careers. I just know that from my when my mom died and I was pushing it down because I was a flight attendant. So it wasn't but I was supposed to be happy all the time. I was supposed to say hi and be happy all the time, right? But pushing it down, it would come up as anger and it would explode over people,
Sure,
and usually friends and family when I'm at home.
sure, sure,
So is that the same
absolutely.
kind of thing that happens, with
Oh
with your
yeah,
relationships in that respect? Because we're pushing it down, we're holding it down and not dealing with it, thinking that it will disappear.
it doesn't.
Doesn't. All right.
It doesn't. So when I say, I tried to keep it separate, that try was the operative word. It doesn't work. At best, you can establish perhaps some unhealthy patterns of behavior in the relationship, where you can kind of navigate it. But that's definitely not what I would call a thriving relationship. It's not a
Hmm.
close, intimate relationship because there's a lot of distance, primarily emotional distance, being emotionally unavailable. So yeah, it doesn't work. And over time, it just adds to it for sure. But, all of those different dynamics, those were all things that were going on in my life. And I was navigating life, again, doing things if I needed to feel better for a short period of time. You and I both know we call that something, short term energy relieving behaviors. But back
Right.
then it was like, what can I do? Because right now this doesn't feel good. Or like, maybe we need to go to counseling for a while, and that'll help us for a little while, but doesn't really fix anything. And again, like all of us, I just kept navigating whatever life was going on, trying to do the best I could with the tools I had at the time. And it would allow me to limp along and live along, right, over
For the
time.
time being.
And again, it worked, you know, you, it works to the level it's going to work, not necessarily what I want until I learn better tools, right? I can make these things kind of figure something out, but again, it's not ideal. It's just a band-aid. It's allowing me to put more nails in the box because I don't want Pandora's box to fully open. So all right, so I might learn something new so I could,
Right.
reseal the lid while it's cracking open. Um,
And how did that
but
work
for
for you?
me, didn't didn't work. Well, it worked well enough, allowing me to continue to put more baggage and emotional energy into my little boxes.
Hmm.
which is just like kicking the can down the road. I mean, that's probably the one thing it did was let me kick the can down the road, causing pain as I went to other people and to myself, and not working real well, but working well enough that I continued to get up the
You can
next
do it
day and
later.
continue to go. Yeah, exactly. Kick the can down the road. Um, and that was my life. Like most people,
Hmm.
and I would say a lot of people listening to this, maybe this sounds kind of familiar to you, right? Like, is your life as joyous and happiness as you thought it was going to be at this point? If you go back 20 years, go back 10 years, what did you think your life was going to look like? Go back to high school. What do you think your life was going to look like 25 years after you were out? So you're starting to think about where you're going to be. Like, is it the way you envisioned it, or are you just surviving it? And most of us, if you get honest, will say, yeah, I got the house, I got the marriage, I have the kids. Boy, this is not what I thought. There's bills, there's life, there's stresses, there's all these other, can't get a moment to myself, or like it's really hard to do anything. That's not what you thought it was going to be 20 years
Hmm.
ago. But you're surviving it, and you're figuring it out. And that was me. And the loss that ultimately overwhelmed everything I thought I knew, the event in my life that completely shattered everything I'd ever put together, or everything that I tried to hold together with duct tape and glue and welding torches and
The
nails and
tools
whatever.
that we hear that may work, because we don't always know what the tools
Right,
are that will help us. Yeah.
right, right. And when, I would try to do all those things, keep all that stuff contained and put it on a back thing. I'll deal with it later, but not right now. Was the death of my 3-year-old son, my firstborn
Mm.
son. And it was an accident, took place in my home, but it was connected to my job. The metal gun box issued by my department to keep my backup gun and my duty gun safe, the lock failed. And my backup gun got out of the metal box it had been locked in, because that's what we were supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And my son was shot with my backup gun. And he would die 4 hours later. They weren't able to save him at the hospital. And when they came in and they said, "I'm sorry, but your son is dead," that was the darkest moment of my life. Prior to that, I was blaming myself. It was the worst 4 hours or so of my life. You know, Wanting to switch places, giving anything. What could I have done differently? I'm a failure as a dad. I'm a failure as a cop. I couldn't even keep my own son safe. I couldn't keep, failure as a dad. My dad's to keep my job is to keep my family safe, but I couldn't do that. Um, a lot of internal blame, a lot of all of that stuff's going on. And then when they said that, "I'm sorry, but your son is dead," the world went black for me. I couldn't see or feel anything but the pain of that moment and that loss. And it was a really dark, painful place to be. Um, the days and weeks afterwards were a blur. We could get into stories and things that happened, and most of
Mm-hmm.
that's just not important. Um, what was important is I was grieving. I was grieving the death of every hope, dream, and expectation I had to be a dad. I was trapped in a sea of regret, misplaced feelings of guilt, uh, going over all of the things I wished were different or had been better. And I definitely could tell you what I wanted more of, I was no longer ever going to have. And that was his physical presence in my life.
Mm.
And from that place, when everything I'd ever been taught in the past, everything I'd ever done in the past, none of it worked. And I said, you limp along in life,
Mm-hmm.
doing the best you can with the tools you have until you need to learn some new tools, but none of them worked anymore. And so people told me that to lose a child was a life sentence.
That's I was just going to ask you that, because I have heard over and over again that you can never get over the loss of a child, and that it
Right.
just crushes you and you can't move on from that.
And that's what I was told too. And I, quite honestly, if you'd asked me about that beforehand, I probably said, oh my God, I can't even imagine. Like, that would be the worst day
Right.
ever, of course. Um, but even that concept, like you can't getting over implies forgetting. And so, of course, we're never going to forget
Yeah.
our children. We're never going to forget any loss, for that matter, any of you that are listening, beloved friend, a sibling, a parent, a grandparent, spouse, perhaps a child for you, a friend, a pet. I mean, you're never going to forget, nor would you want to. So this whole concept of getting over, which implies having to forget, is ridiculous. Sorry, folks. Not the way that works. For me, that whole thing of it will be a life sentence of pain, that didn't feel right to me. How could what was one of the deepest sources of love and joy, and the moment he was born and having him up against my chest and feeling his heart and feeling that unconditional love connection, how could that equal a life sentence of misery?
Yeah.
Like, how could that love equal this? It didn't make sense to me. And when people said, you're going to have to suffer for the rest of your life, if you're lucky, you will figure out what your new normal will look like. I even have people use the analogy of a soldier coming home from war who lost an arm or a leg, and you will figure out what your new normal is. And I'm like, no,
You didn't want
that
that.
cannot be true. Again, that was me. You can call me stubborn. You can call me whatever. You can say that my intuition was screaming at me that was not the right answer. But again, that really boiled down to everyone said this, and I couldn't accept that as an answer. And so I kind of went on this mission to really figure out, like, what can I do about this? Because there's, again, someone Ryan was such a source of love and light for me that there's no way that for the rest of my life, that love had to equal pain. And people suggested things. I tried it. I had multiple different types of counseling and therapy because it was my duty gun. I couldn't even look at a handgun without having anxiety. So I had to go through immersion therapy where I'm actually having to touch guns and then shoot guns and do all these other things, like forcing myself to inoculate myself back into these things. I did all types of different therapists and modalities. They put me on antidepressants. I hated those things. I felt worse on those than I did. So I quit taking those. If someone suggested something, I tried it. I went back to things that used to work for me, like coming back from combat tours. I used to drink a lot. How I never became an alcoholic, I don't know. Was it for lack of effort? Trust me. Sure tried hard, but I never.
But that wasn't working. That wasn't helping you.
No, it didn't help. At best, I might be able to black out so I could finally
forget about
sleep.
it for a little bit.
Right. It was a short-term energy relieving behavior that allowed me to pass out where I consciously couldn't remember the images of that night. I'm sure at a subconscious level I did, because I never felt like I really rested very well. So I'm sure all of it was going on. I just didn't have to consciously. But again, it was like I was surviving barely. But if someone suggested something to me, I was like so desperate I would try it. And over several years, I really went on this journey. Like, I tried to keep myself busy. I tried to, correct the wrongs, the things that had contributed to my son's death, like failed lock and being a defect. I tried to deal with that. I did all these other things. And if someone suggested, have you thought about this? I went and tried it. I sought out people who had lost children, like, help me deal with this. And one day somebody suggested, have you ever heard of this thing called the grief recovery method? And actually, I was actually at a seminar. I'd gone to a different seminar, right? And someone had suggested it was a 5-day thing. And I was at this, and and it was a great seminar. Don't get me wrong. I still love the concepts that I learned from that. So I learned a lot that made me a better human being in life, but I still kept looking for what was missing. Or they'd help for a little while, but like, no, that's not what I was looking for. I keep looking. So while I was there, I actually would meet, she's not my fiance. We've been together for, well over 10 years. I mean, and she said, I want to introduce you to my mom. And she's a grief recovery specialist. She's a grief recovery specialist. And I didn't know what that was. And so I went to lunch and she talked about it, and I went back home after lunch and I looked it up, and there was a class coming up in 10 days. And so I called down to the office in LA, talked to Nancy, because we used to be Sherman Oaks, California.
Right, right.
I said, sign me up and sign up Dawn. And I signed her up, and then I called her and said, hey, I signed us both up for this class. And she's like, no, I don't have any grief. That's for you. I'm like, well, if I'm going to this thing and you and your mom are suggesting that I need this, you're going with me. So I drug her to it wound up being a certification class. I didn't think I was going to go be a specialist. I didn't think I was going to go work with people. I just wanted to go and see if it was going to work.
Right.
And it was the last thing I tried, but it was the first thing that ever worked. And it's the only thing that has worked. And here I am well over a decade later. And I can talk about Ryan all day long. And it's not a source of pain. I can hold on to all of the sweet, beautiful memories of my relationship with him. Smile and laugh and enjoy the things around him, that what he was, love and light. And it's not painful, and it's still working. And it works so well. I went back, I had a company I'd created. I got rid of it. I started working with people who were grieving, and I've never looked back. And over the last 10 plus years, I got to become a trainer. I trained with John and Russell, our founders. I got to train as certified specialists all over the world, worked my way up, and now I'm helping Cole run the company. And again, it's the last thing I tried. It's the only thing that truly worked. And well over a decade later, it's the only thing that still works.
So anybody that's listening, the grief recovery method actually started from the similar story. John James lost his child, and he was searching for something to help him with his grief, that deep grief. And I love that when you're talking about your son, Ed, that you can smile about it. You can have those great memories without the pain, and that's what the method does. It helps you be able to hold on to the person and all the good memories without that pain that grief causes us, without the pain every day.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that story. I mean, that's just, I have never lost a child. That story is just amazing, because I hear from other people that wouldn't work for me, but it does. It started from somebody who lost their child at a very young age.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what it was. John was a Vietnam vet. John was raised in an alcohol addicted father, very abusive childhood. He had other losses in his life, a couple combat tours, Vietnam, failed business. I mean, just a lot of all of those different types of things were all John's story. And it was the death of his firstborn son. It was his second child. He had a girl, and then had his boy. But that is exactly what drove John to say, why does it hurt so bad? And more importantly, what can I do about this? And those two questions put him on a mission to figure it out. And over the course of about the next 9 months or so, he experimented on himself. If it worked, he kept it. If it didn't work, he got rid of it. If that didn't work, but let me see how I can fix this so it does work. But that worked a little bit. How can I make it better? And he pieced together for himself something that worked. And then he went back to building homes. He had a construction company, right? John was a cowboy, wore a cowboy hat and cowboy boots, right? I mean, he was from Illinois and then lived in Montana before he went to California to build solar homes and all this other stuff. And again, simple guy, real simple guy. And grief is not complex. I want to throw that in there real quick. So many people think that for those of you that can't see what I'm doing, I'm pointing to my head. If you're listening on a podcast, will think that intellect, like I can think my way out of the pain. Like I shouldn't feel bad. Just tell yourself you shouldn't feel bad or whatever, right? Sorry, folks. I hate to break it to you. I got bad news. The brain and the heart speak two different languages, right?
Yeah.
And I guarantee you, if you're honest with yourself, I know you know this is true, Kelly, but anyone listening, if you're honest with yourself, have you been able to think your way out of emotionally painful stuff Or at best, have you been able to intellectually push things back into a box?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
it doesn't work.
I
Right?
I did that. I did that when my mom died. Logically, she had cancer. She didn't leave me. She didn't abandon me. She died from cancer. So logically, it shouldn't hurt. I mean, it's just part of life. I mean, it would hurt a little bit, right? It's just part of life. But if I was honest, I was in my early 20s. If I was honest, I felt lost. I felt
Mm-hmm. Of
abandoned by my mom.
course.
Logically, that doesn't make sense. But my heart felt abandoned. I felt lost. The same thing, I'm
Mm-hmm.
adopted. I found out my birth mom was 18 and my birth dad was 16. They didn't have a relationship anymore. She gave me up for adoption. Intellectually, that was wonderful. But there's that little kid in me that was just like, why didn't she want me? I knew intellectually that wasn't the situation, but it's like, why didn't she want me?
Mm-hmm.
That little pain. I had to deal with that little pain in my heart, even though intellectually I understood it as an adult.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Folks, they're two separate languages. And Kelli, you were very articulate that there are two separate things.
They are.
Grief is an emotional reaction to loss of any kind. And it's not an intellectual reaction to loss of any
Right.
kind.
Right.
Right. And because it's an emotional reaction, right, we have to get to the heart of the matter and deal with the emotional pain from an emotional perspective. And what's that really about? And again, like you guys, I hope you contact Kelli. I hope you'll have a lot of questions for her, or you can reach out and talk to me or anybody else. But we're not taught how to do that.
Right.
Right. And that's the thing. Like we're taught to rely upon our intellect to justify it. I shouldn't feel bad because they're no longer suffering. So therefore I should minimize it. I had a great life over here, regardless of the fact they did this. So let's focus on gratitude, but we're not taught, folks, how to deal with the emotional pain. And that's really kind of what Kelli and I are blessed and fortunate enough to be able to do is give some people some helpful information, just like that awareness, like it's an emotional event, folks, not an intellectual one.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a deep thing. I hope you think about that. And then how do I deal with that? Because we weren't taught how to deal with that. So let's give you some really accurate information. Now let me give you some, again, it's not easy, folks, because it hurts. I'm going to tell you, if it hurts, whatever it is you went through, it's going to hurt to go through it to deal with it.
Yeah.
Um,
But you can't just ignore it.
No, you can't, because it will affect your health. It will affect the other relationships in your life. It will chew away at your capacity to enjoy life in the moment.
Yes.
It will limit your ability in life to make the dreams you had 10 years ago, 20 years ago happen. Right? Grief drains us of energy and robs us of choice. And when we are emotionally drained and a lifetime of emotional things we carry, it takes so much energy to keep those things contained in the compartments we build and the walls we put up around our hearts to keep ourselves from hurting anymore because we're tired of hurting than it does to deal with it. Grievers, people who are hurting, who've experienced trauma and emotional pain, grief, loss, have never lacked the courage to want to feel better. They want to feel better.
We look for all kinds of ways to fix it, right?
We do. We do. What we lack is some helpful knowledge that we didn't know, that somebody else figured out, and then some very distinct actions and steps that we can take one at a time so we don't get overwhelmed because it's going to hurt, but the outcome is worth it. That's the thing, folks. You can't run away from the painful things you've been through in your life. You can't hide from them. You can't bury them. You can't kick them down the road because sooner or later it's going to catch up with you, right? We had to go through the loss to feel its impact in our life and how much we miss and how much we are deeply impacted because of that loss in order to deal with the pain of that event, that loss, that change in pattern of behavior. We have to be willing to get emotionally honest, tell the truth about how it felt then and how it feels now, because we got to go through it. We have to be willing to deal with it. And again, grievers have never lacked the courage to want to feel better. They just haven't known how to.
We often,
and that's Good.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of those things that you said is that we try different things, but we keep it in. And the more we have it in our bodies, the longer it's there. For me, I got an autoimmune disease. It
Mhm.
affects our physical body because we are connected physically, mentally, emotionally. We're all
Mhm. Mhm.
connected, and it's going to affect it one way or the other. It's going to affect our body. It's going to affect, we're going to be tired. It's going to affect our intellect because we're have brain fog. There's all kinds of things that grief
Yep.
causes us to become. And I think, and you're right, as grievers, we do want to get better. And we
Absolutely.
often have all those myths, and people are telling us, try this, or ignore it, or time will heal it. And those things don't work. And it's one of those things that's my passion, is to let people know that this works.
Mhm.
And it's not just helpful for the loss of a child or the loss of a parent,
No.
but it's for any kind of loss. I've worked on myself. I had a traumatic brain injury, and there's that loss of feeling different. I didn't think I felt like myself anymore. I had to relearn how to learn. There's all that loss that creates all this frustration, and it was bringing up anger with me of just, why am I like this? I'm
100%.
different. And these
100%.
the grief recovery method teaches us tools to help you with any kind of loss whenever they come up,
Correct.
and they will come up. You're not
Oh,
immune to loss.
absolutely. Absolutely. One of the only things we are guaranteed, right? People say, oh, yeah, death and taxes and all this. I would say grief, right? Folks cannot, unless you are, at the beginning, we said there's that one little percentage of the population that can't feel emotions. We're not talking about them, folks. I'm talking to the rest of you, because those folks are probably not listening to this podcast anyway. So all of you that are listening to this have the capacity and know what we're talking about when you think like sweet and sour feelings. Like you could felt it all. You have felt joy and happiness and all of that, and the deepest sources of sadness and depression. Great. Because you can feel that stuff, folks. We are guaranteed to feel it. We are designed to feel the greatest highs and the deepest lows. We're supposed to. We're humans. The key is we need to relearn what we knew as toddlers how to do, which was express our feelings and emotions in the moment, live in the moment, be in the moment. If I'm happy, I'm happy to 100%. If I'm sad and pissed off, who's heard a little kid, 1 year old, 2 year old, like they're giggling? It's magical. Oh my God, 100%. They're full body giggles. And then 2 minutes later, what? They're pissed off.
Yeah.
They're
They're
emotional.
angry.
And they let you know at 100%. Folks, that's how we are designed. All of us, to process our feelings and emotions, to express our feelings and emotions in the moment, whatever that moment is, and move to the next moment,
So that we don't
not
get
become story.
stuck there. And that's the big thing, is not
Correct.
to get stuck in that pain that you feel
Or
with those
carry it.
losses, or carry
Or
it.
carry it for the rest of your life.
Yes.
We're not supposed to, but we lose this innate ability to live in the moment. We get socialized. Society teaches us a whole lot of things. Children are really smart. We watch the adults around us. And whatever the adults are doing, that must be how it's done. It's like, oh, like, I can't cry. I need to be strong. Oh, I'm sorry. I got emotional there for a minute and apologize for it. Or, excuse me, and they go in their room, close the door, but you hear them crying, but you can't see mom and dad crying. But then they come back out and everything appears like they're fine. And feelings inside they're not expressing. The kids see this stuff, folks, and they watch us.
Right.
And again, like when I first heard these concepts and I'm listening, like, oh my God, I was a terrible dad. What did I teach my kids? I taught them some bad information, right? I did the best I could with the tools I had until I had better tools. When we that, realize that, it's very easy to see when we look back on our own lives, the things we've been through, how we navigated them, what did we do to get through them, and we got through them and we learned to survive whatever life throws at us based on what tools we got until we learn better tools. And my hope is that all of you are listening are interested in learning some tools that you should have been taught, but we
Absolutely.
weren't. Tools I wasn't taught until much later in my life. I had to
Me
wait
either.
until I was in my 40s. Right? Kelli, she had to wait until she was, like 22. or whatever it was.
I learned the tool then, but I will tell you that I used it for my mom and then I forgot about it because when you're emotional, you forget like all the things you learn.
Sure,
And it wasn't
sure.
until 2020 that I had the book and I carried it around and I lost it and I got a new book and then I was like, oh, this can work for all my losses.
Correct. Correct. And we've spent a lot of time talking about death because that's what most people think grief is about.
Right.
But you've mentioned a few of them, and we'll just rattle them off right now real fast. Folks, the number two thing that people come to us for help on is the end of a romantic relationship or divorce.
Or end of
That's the number two
friendship.
thing.
There's the end of friendship that people don't talk about, or the end of their relationship with their family members, which is going on a lot.
Right. Oh, the end of a divorce, of a romantic relationship, end of a friendship, estrangement from family members, lost friendships. Folks, those are deaths of relationships. It is the death of that relationship. It is the death of the hopes, dreams, and expectations you had for that relationship. And I guarantee you all could sit there if you get honest with yourself. You can identify how you wish it was better or different, and what you want more of, you no longer have. Right? That's normal. But folks, any change in a familiar pattern of behavior, death is just the end of a physical relationship, which obviously is an end of that physical relationship, end of a familiar pattern of behavior. But a change in it results in it. Moving, career change, loss of health, loss of trust, loss of safety. If I have hopes and dreams about how safe my community is, and me walking after dark through town and I don't feel safe, well, I guarantee I had the hope and dream that I would be able to walk in my own town at night when the sun goes down and feel safe. And if I don't, I have regrets. Am I living in the right place? All these other things, like it applies to us in every aspect of our life, folks. As human beings, we have feelings around everything. Feelings around our bosses, our coworkers, our neighbors. We have feelings around our communities. We have feelings around our countries. We have an opinion on everything.
And I do have to say, I have used this on my relationship with my husband. That's good because it still works because there's things that have happened. It's no relationship. There's always going to be something in your relationship that you have to work on, right? And it helps me not have bitterness in the relationship, and I can get out the frustration of something that happened. How major or minor it is, but it helps your good relationships too, to know the tools to help any relationship that you have.
Yeah, for them to be better.
Absolutely.
Because something, the little stuff adds up.
Well, that's what creates the bitterness. One of my trainers, Laura, had this thing of, if you think of I'm a horrible gardener, so I had to just agree with her on this. But if you have this beautiful garden outside, and everything's beautiful, but in the left corner that no one can see are these weeds. They will come and creep and ruin the rest of your beautiful garden. Well, that's
Correct.
The same with our relationships, any relationship that we have, that if you have one little thing that's bothering you in that relationship, eventually at some point, it's going to cause ugliness in some other part. It's going to have the weeds are going to come over into the other areas of your beautiful relationship. So you want to get that out as soon as possible, so that it doesn't ruin your relationship.
100%. 100%. And anybody who's got a yard or a garden knows that you also cannot grow anything else if the weeds have taken over the garden, right? They choke out the beautiful flowers.
Right.
They choke out the vegetables that I'm wanting to try and grow. Like the weeds will destroy everything which is beautiful that I love, right? And replace it with just a lot of things that I once loved that now are a source of pain and sadness because I see the dead flowers. I see a dead garden. And that is not what I wished. It's not what I planned. That's not what my hopes and dreams when I planted the garden. Right? None of us plan these beautiful things in our life, relationships, careers, being a parent, whatever it is you're planning to do. You don't plan them to be decaying and dying and all these other things. That's not what we plan for.
Right.
We know that might happen, of course. That's all, it's always accidents happen. Tomorrow's not promised, folks. So if you have a party thing, anybody who's currently in your life, I want you to go tell them, I love you and this is what I appreciate about you, right? Because if you don't say it, When the sun comes up tomorrow and they're not there, I guarantee you will have a regret and you will have a source of deep emotional pain that you will carry because you have some unfinished business and
Absolutely.
you can take care of it, but you better take care of it before sun up tomorrow.
Well, Ed, we're at the top of the hour and I wanted to ask you, is there any last, words of wisdom, because you have tons, that you want to share with anyone before we wrap up?
So anyone who's been listening to this podcast, first of all, thank you. Because that's a big deal right there. It means that you're curious. I started this out by saying, I hope you listen to this conversation and lean into it with curiosity. You don't have to agree with what we're saying, Kelli or me, but we need to be curious. Because if we're not curious that there might be a different way of dealing with something, you can keep doing what you've been doing up to this point in your life, and you will get the same results you've been getting, which is you survive to the next day, to the next week, and that type of thing. But that's not my wish for you. My wish for you, be curious and try and how can I thrive in spite of what I've been through and what does that look like? I want to know more about what that looks like. That's where the curiosity comes in. And you've got a great resource in Kelli, and I want you to please reach out and have a conversation with Kelli about what you're curious about and how this might help you, because I know it will. And I know there's a lot of people in this world who says, oh yeah, this is what you got to do. This is the best thing ever, right? I really want to know what was better than sliced bread before sliced bread was invented, because, I'm curious about that. But folks, I promise you, you will not regret something that Kelli and I are talking about. You really won't. So if this has had value, if you have some curiosity around this conversation, and I encourage you, without action, there can be no change. If you do not reach out to Kelli and take that action, right, it's going to be really hard for you to take something beyond that. And so thanks for being curious. Thanks for listening to the end of this podcast, which, by the way, if you did, kudos to you, right? That's not always the case.
You should put that in the comments so I can high five you, because that's great, just listening to the whole thing.
Yes, I got to the end.
Yes,
put it in the comments. Put it in the comments. Ask a question, and ask Kelli a question, and allow that curiosity to see what's possible. Because if we don't, what you've experienced up to this point will continue, folks. Without action, there can be no change. So I challenge you to take an action. Reach out to Kelli. Take an action. Learn more about what you can do to live the life you were designed to live, which is one where you are loved by other people and you get to love them in return, and you get to feel it. You get to trust other humans and be trusted in return. And we get to feel connected to each other, one human being, one heart, to another human being and their heart. That's what we're here for, folks. And that's a choice. So take an action. Get a hold of Kelli. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much. And you guys remember that there is hope, there is healing, and there are real tools to this works. And I just wanted to thank you for listening, like Ed said. And you can, if you don't want to work with me, there's other people. Work with Ed. Ed is fantastic. Grief Recovery Institute, which is griefrecoverymethod.com. You can find him. You can find me. You can find me at renewedhopegriefrecovery.com. But please follow this podcast. Follow Feel Good, Feel Free again, I should say, is Cole's podcast. If you want more information of how you can feel better, how you can not like Ed shared, and what I experienced, instead of feeling that pain every day, especially when you're thinking about that person or thinking it, you can feel free from that. You have those good memories that you can feel those memories and enjoy those memories of people that you've lost. And I just thank you. And I look forward to come again of listening to the podcast, Renewed Hope After Loss. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kelli. And thank you for listening, folks.
Thanks.